It's been 3 weeks since Inter Miami were sent packing from the MLS's back tourney in Orlando. Are you still licking your wounds, Inter Miami fans, or are you looking forward to August 22nd? That is the date when your Rosa Negra will play game number 6 and look to avoid a 6th straight defeat, a 100% negative record. And they'll probably be taking the field with a new DP, Blaise Matuidi's arrival imminent, if you're to believe Fabrizio Romano. This is Miami Total Football Radio. I'm Eric Krakauer, joined by Inter Miami insider Franco Panizo, who's just moved into a new home mid-pandemic. Franco, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm now next to the Hard Rock in Davie/Hollywood with one of my good buddies. So the move's been good, but there's bigger news with Blaise Matuidi. Maybe he'll be looking for a roommate. He might want to move in as well. We have an extra room here, so Blaise, if you're listening, we got you, brother. But look, I mean, there's some interesting stuff to talk about because the moves obviously come with some good and bad feedback, you know, in these opening few hours of the news.
You're still talking about Blaise Matuidi and not your move next door to the Hard Rock hotel or casino, right? That's what you're talking about. Okay,
yeah.
okay. Although I would argue that that's pretty big news for you, considering that you like to frequent that locale pre-pandemic. I'm not sure during the pandemic, but post-pandemic, I'm pretty sure that you are going to be dipping your toes in one of those pools. And hopefully one of these days I'll be there with you. But congrats on moving to your new home. But we don't have much time on today's pod because we promised that we'd keep it short or as long as we usually intend to leave our pod, and we always go over. So let's get to it. Okay, early this morning, better yet, Twitter was abuzz with news that World Cup winner Blaise Matuidi is about to ink a deal with Inter Miami. Transfer news guru Fabrizio Romano said the deal is almost done. He's rarely wrong. And perhaps Matuidi is the long sought-after third DP. Franco, you had long argued that Inter Miami needed an 8. They got one. What says you? What says you?
What say you? I think that's the appropriate one.
Yeah, that's it. That's right. That's just why I never use aphorisms or anything of the sort.
So listen, I think this just shows that I knew what I was talking about during the MLS's back tournament. While you were,
that's how you're starting.
While you were arguing that they needed a number 9 more than a number 8. No, all kidding aside, I think this addresses a need that they've had for a while. That they talked before the pandemic shutdown back in late February about signing Agustin Almendra on loan, Boca Juniors central midfielder, because that was a spot that they wanted to fill. The central midfield spot was an area that they wanted to bolster with another player that was going to be a starter. And they obviously went a little bit older than many of us expected with this reported news, but I think it's a good move overall. I think it helps Inter Miami address a need. Obviously, there's still another need to address, which is a striker or another attacking spot. And how they go about that is going to be interesting because you have to imagine that Blaise Matuidi will be assigned as a designated player. But I think overall this is a positive move, a good move. I know you have I won't say a hot take, but I think you have an interesting take that's not necessarily overly positive, overly negative. I think you're kind of somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, look, I'm neither positive nor negative. I'm just being purely objective here. And first of all, kudos to you because you said that the team needed a number 8. I felt and I still feel that a number 9, a proven scorer, was the more important signing, and I can go into detail about that, but I'll keep it short, and I will say that, Inter Miami, although they did not play well, they did create a couple of opportunities in each game, and I thought that they needed to be taken, the situations that players were in. The ones that really come to mind were Julian Carranza's 2 against Philadelphia, one which was saved, the other one I forget exactly what happened. So for me, that remains a huge hole that needs plugged up. But let's address the Blaise Matuidi, and I'll start with this. I'm a big fan of Blaise Matuidi's. I know his game well. I know him from PSG. I know him from Juve. He hasn't had much continuity at Juve under Mauricio Sarri, but that was going to be that was obvious for anybody who had seen Matuidi play and who knew the kind of football that Sarri was going to try to implement at Juve, and even with the other players who kind of fit his system a little bit more, didn't really show up in the way that he expected them to, and we've seen what the result of that is because they've just been kicked out of the Champions League. Matuidi is also a World Cup winner, and not only a World Cup winner, but he was an integral player in Didier Deschamps' first 11. A guy who was sort of shoehorned into a formation that isn't his best, playing as a left midfielder, but who tucked in centrally to allow Lucas Hernandez to maraud down his corridor. Now, having said that, all the conversations that you and I had, Franco, were that the number 8 that Inter Miami was looking for, and the idea that I was getting is a center mid who is a ball player, a guy who is going to stitch the game together, and Blaise Matuidi is not that guy. And I'll continue in a little bit, but I'll let you respond to just that point there, that this guy is not the ball player, the link. the deep lying playmaker, or the link between the midfield, between the defense and attack that was sorely missed, and that you and I dissected ad nauseum on this podcast. I don't think he's the guy who links it in that particular way. And I'll add this: he is also not the guy, I think, that is that bona fide star that is going to attract a lot of people to the stadium. But having said that, and I'll talk about his qualities in a second after I let you respond, I have no doubt that once he comes to Inter Miami, if this does actually materialize, that he will become a fan favorite for all the reasons that I will articulate in a little bit.
So I'm going to start with agreeing with you that he's not the number 8 or the type of number 8 that maybe would maybe best be suited for what Inter Miami needs or maybe was looking for. Obviously, Agustin Almendra is quite a different player than Blaise Matuidi in terms of just their skill sets. However, I think with Matuidi's arrival, you're going to see, or imminent arrival, if it like you said, if it materializes, I think you're going to see a situation where he plays as a 6 and Will Trapp is played more as an 8, where you don't have to have Will Trapp sitting so deep, and you can free him up a little bit from some defensive responsibilities and let him play that game that he's more known for, which again is linking the defense to the attack and moving the ball side to side and moving it forward. He's not going to overwhelm you with any one thing, but he can be that ball carrier that Inter Miami has been lacking. He hasn't shown that during these first 5 games that they've had. He's struggled by and large, and I think we said it on the last episode. Victor Ulloa has outplayed him, probably, at least in our opinions, but Will Trapp is the more talented player. That's why he's on the national team. He's been on the national team scene for a while Victor Ulloa, I don't think he's ever even had a call-up. So I think the idea is that Matuidi will sit in behind Will Trapp, and I think that will free up Will Trapp to play more to his strengths. Now,
are you saying? Sorry to interrupt. So, in what you were envisioning, are you suggesting that Ulloa is benched, or is he a part of the midfield with those 2 guys? I
think Ulloa will get benched. I think he will be the reserve option, the number 1 reserve option at center midfield. I mean, it's pretty clear to me that's been the case. Will Trapp's obviously the higher rated player in MLS circles, in the national team, and they've been looking for a center midfielder openly, publicly. They've said it. Diego Alonso has been very respectful, or he's been very reserved in terms of talking about what type of player they want to sign, and that's been the case all year, much of the year, because he always says he wants to show respect to the players he has, but the personal internal conversations that they had have come out when Paul McDonough has spoken to the press, when Jorge Mas has spoken to the press. They've been looking for a number 8, so they were looking to upgrade the position from early on, and it wasn't going to be to replace Will Trapp, who they traded for, who's a national team player, who's considered, I don't think you sign Will Trapp or acquire Will Trapp to have him on the bench. I think Victor Ulloa will, even though he's played better for my money so far, I think the idea will be, if they can finalize this move for Matuidi, I think that the idea will be Blaise Matuidi, Will Trapp, Victor Ulloa goes to the bench.
You see, it's interesting that in you saying that, it actually brings up one of the caveats of this move, if it happens, and that is what I was trying to articulate today on Twitter. I was responding to Kartik Krishnaiyer, and I responded to Taylor Twellman, who retweeted your tweet. Taylor Twellman basically said, to paraphrase it, that, having seen Inter Miami like we all have in the first few games, any addition to that midfield is a positive addition. And you bring in a World Cup winner, you bring a guy with a lot of pedigree to that team. And yes, of course, at face value, absolutely, you can't disagree with that. But that is too generalized a statement to really look at what's happening over here. And I think that if you really want to understand Blaise Matuidi's role, or you really want to scrutinize his role in this team, you have to look at the systems that Diego Alonso has played so far. So you and I have talked about this. He's played a 3-4-3 or a hybrid of sorts, sometimes a 3-4-2-1. And more often, I think it's been a 3-4-2-1 than anything else, and a 4-2-3-1. And when you say that you can envision Trapp and Matuidi playing in a system together where Ulloa gets benched, I'm assuming you're suggesting that it's a 4-2-3-1. Am I correct in making that assumption?
Yeah, that's the formation I think they're going to go with, just based on the personnel, based on, I know they've gone with the three-man back line with wing backs, but I think that's just making best out of the situations they've had. I think the 4-2-3-1, I think that's the ideal formation that they want to go with. I don't have any inside information as to that. I haven't heard that that's Diego Alonso's preference, but I think based off of what we've seen, that's what he would like to go with.
So although there's no doubt Matuidi coming into this midfield is a huge improvement. Having seen Matuidi play for years, his strengths are the following. His positioning defensively is excellent. He's an intelligent player in covering spaces. He can cover a tremendous amount of ground. He is a motor in midfield. And the fact that he's 33 should not scare Inter Miami fans, because this is a guy who's going to arrive in better shape than most players in Major League Soccer, because he's that kind of player. He probably has the body of a 25-year-old. He is excellent at driving into the box, usually in the left half space, the left channel, center channel. He can score goals from that position. He is a very physical presence. Like I said before, he's not the best ball player in the world, but at least in comparison to the talent that he had around him at PSG and at Juve. But it's a completely different story at Inter Miami and Major League Soccer, because the level is nowhere near close to one of the top 5 leagues, to any one of the top 5 leagues in Europe. So it's interesting, because when I look at news of his imminent arrival, I'm thinking that Diego Alonso knows the player he's getting. So does David Beckham. In fact, David Beckham played with him at PSG. And the system that best suits Matuidi is a 4-3-3, where he plays on the left side of an inverted triangle. Ulloa would play on the right, the way I would see it, and then Will Trapp at the back. And in doing that, you basically free up, like you suggested, Trapp from a lot of his defensive duties, and you allow him to be that deep line playmaker, the guy who's playing behind those two, although his defensive responsibilities are not marking, but they are they are zonal, right? cutting out the passing lanes. And I think that's where Will Trapp can do a good job for you defensively, and I think we saw that in Columbus. But if that actually happens and Diego Alonso moves to a 4-3-3, my big question is, where does Pizarro play? Right? Because the reason I think that he hasn't played the 4-3-3 so far is, number one, because you have to figure out where Pizarro is going to play. And I don't think that in a 4-3-3 with the players that Inter Miami has at their disposal in the midfield, I don't think you have balance. I don't think a three-man midfield of Pizarro, Ulloa, and Trapp is balanced, right? Ulloa is doing most of the work, and he can't do it alone. Pizarro and Trapp are not going to give you the defensive solidity that you need, but all of a sudden you bring in Matuidi, and you can play Matuidi and Ulloa next to Trapp or just ahead of Trapp in that 4-3-3. Sort of like, I'm not comparing this in terms of talent, but sort of like what we saw with Juve back when Pirlo was playing for Juve. You had Arturo Vidal on one side and you had Marquisio or Paul Pogba on the other. They did a lot of the work, especially Marquisio and Arturo Vidal, and that allowed Pirlo to be Pirlo. And I think you could see the same thing here. But again, the question becomes, where do you place Pizarro? So I think that formation is certainly a possibility. And if that is the style that he wants to play, then Matuidi's inclusion is a really good one. I think it improves our midfield tremendously. If he's only going to play Matuidi as a 6 with Will Trapp next to him with a little bit more freedom, I think you're going to run into the same problems that we've seen Inter Miami go through so far. I know that was a little bit long. Apologies.
I think your rationale and your explanation for the 4-3-3 makes sense if it's, to put Matuidi in the position he's best suited to fill. But I think they're, considering that he's making not the jump, but he's taking, I guess, a competitive step backwards, at least 1, 2, maybe 3. I think that they think he can do the job in a 4-2-3-1. I don't think they're gonna all of a sudden switch to a 4-3-3. That's gonna put a lot more emphasis on the wingers to create, and you said where would Pizarro play? I would imagine he'd play on the left in a 4-3-3, just like he did in the second game against DC United.
Yep.
I think the 4-2-3-1's just it's going to be what they're going to go with for the long haul. I think they obviously need to figure out the right back spot. That's been a rotation they've done it by committee in these first 5 games. But I think the 4-2-3-1 just gets you the balanced lineup that Diego Alonso seeks, and I think it gets you your most talented players, or as many of your most talented players on the field. Whereas the 4-3-3, I'm not sure that does that. Like Pellegrini, you take Pellegrini out of the lineup to start Ulloa. I don't know if that's necessarily something that's going to help you in the attack. So I think the 4-2-3-1 is going to be the way they go. I think Matuidi will, again, help Will Trapp play to his strengths. I think Matuidi, and I don't want to compare skill sets because that's not what I'm looking to do here, but I think he will fill a Jermaine Jones type function in term when he joined the New England Revolution. Jermaine Jones was tasked with just roaming, breaking things up, and jumping into the attack on occasion, and that allowed the New England Revolution to take a huge step forward. They made the MLS Cup final the first year he had signed, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's more along the lines of what they're thinking with this move, or with this reported move. But we'll see. I mean, I could be wrong, you could be right, and next week we can come here, or 2 weeks from now, and after they've played a game and maybe he shows or starts or plays, we can revisit it, and I can give you your props for calling it correctly, or vice versa, which we're getting used to because vice versa is happening a lot here.
Okay, very quickly before we move on, that was actually the perfect segue for us to get into our next segment. But I will say this: obviously the gaping hole, and maybe gaping is a little bit of hyperbolic, but the number 9 spot do you think that still gets addressed?
So someone asked me this on Twitter. I think it's tough. I think it's tough to see it happening. I think just given that what they've tried to do all year long, and they've been linked to so many names, they've confirmed some of those names, and they've just kind of swung and missed over and over again. And I think given the time of year, we're in August already, and the negotiating aspect hasn't been easy for them. I think it's tough. Won't say it's impossible, but I think it's really tough to see them sign another player as a designated player or as a striker. Obviously, they're looking for a game changer up top or on the wing. They confirmed that they were talking to Willian in recent weeks. They confirmed they were talking to Cavani in recent weeks. They couldn't get either one.
No, Cavani's going to Benfica. That's pretty much done and dusted.
Yes, so I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough for what they want, and I think maybe that's what even led them to get Matuidi even more. Is that all right, if we can't get a third DP attacker, well then let's make the midfielder a DP level player so that we can get as much out of that signing as possible, at least for this first season, until we can regroup in the off season and try again in terms of the number 9. But again, I don't want to say it's impossible. I just think it's going to be tough.
And you know what that means? That means that Carranza, Agudelo, Robinson, and maybe even Kieswetter, well, they're going to have to figure out how to put the ball in the back of the net. We're going to take a quick break, and then we are going to talk about the second season reboot in Major League Soccer. All right, I asked at the beginning of the pod whether you, Inter Miami fans, were licking your wounds or looking forward to the campaign's second reboot. Orlando, here in Miami, August 22nd. That is the next game number 6. 4 days later, it will be Atlanta United once again at home before trips to Nashville and Atlanta before returning to Fort Lauderdale once again to face Nashville and Orlando. And as you can tell, some repetition there, Franco.
Yeah, so obviously this first phase of MLS's resumption of the regular season is done regionally with regional matchups in mind. Inter Miami will at long last have a home opener. Doesn't appear that there will be fans in the stadium, though that possibility still exists based on the language of the press release that the team sent out. But whether there's fans or not, Inter Miami will at long last play a game in their stadium. They obviously were 2 days away from that back in March, and then the pandemic shutdown changed all that. So they'll get their first game. It'll be against Orlando City. It could be the potential MLS back champions. They're in the final of the tournament against the Portland Timbers, which will be played on Tuesday night. So we'll see. We'll know if Orlando City will head into that Sunshine Clásico, the second edition of the Sunshine Clásico, as the runners-up of the MLS back tournament or as the champions, which will obviously, if it's the latter, will make for an extra added storyline. Inter Miami is already preparing for that game. They had an inter-squad scrimmage this past Saturday, full uniforms and everything. The starting team had the all-white uniforms. Not all-white. They had the white top, white shorts, and for some reason they had the black socks. And then the away team, the second team had the away jersey, the black jersey with the black shorts and the black and pink socks. So
yeah, and AJ De La Garza's sighting in that scrimmage.
Yeah, he put it on his Instagram that he actually played center back during that scrimmage, and he said it's the first time he's played center back in 4 years, and he was really happy to not have to do as much running as he's been doing this season with Inter Miami at the center midfield spot, and in previous seasons with Houston Dynamo at the right fullback spot. So Inter Miami's preparing for Orlando. They're already fully into their preparations and plans for that match, whereas Orlando City obviously has got their attention elsewhere right now, and it'll be good to see Inter Miami at their home stadium at long last, probably without fans, like I said before. But
Definitely without fans.
hey, I wouldn't
Probably.
look. I wouldn't put it past. I wouldn't put it past anything, man. There's other teams that have announced that they'll have fans in the stands. So
Yeah.
and Inter
And like
Miami,
Dallas.
exactly. So Inter Miami, again like the striker situation. I would say it's unlikely, or tough, but I wouldn't rule it out completely. I think it's possible, especially look, and the reason why these clubs are doing it, regardless of what they say publicly, is to recover and recuperate some of the money that they've lost during this whole
Of
pandemic.
course.
Well,
Of
I mean,
course.
Sporting Kansas City's owner or president came out a few days ago and said that wasn't for financial reasons, and that's not the reasons that they're reopening their stadium. But I mean I wouldn't take that at face value. I think the biggest reason for this, I mean, look, in Europe the virus has been dealt with at an improved rate, and even there they're not having fans in most stadiums. So I think
Right.
that's more. I think the financial part is a big aspect of why that's even being considered for MLS teams.
Of course, and I find the whole thing. I mean, anytime people compare it to Europe, I just want to smack them. Yeah, because it's
So
a
you want to
completely
smack me? I just compared it.
No, no, no. But I'm talking about comparing it as a
I know.
means to
Just busting your
justify.
chops.
No, I know, as a means to justify putting bums on seats like the USL has done. I mean, I find it incomprehensible how that is even an option right now. And just take the evidence that we've seen, which, NBA bubble working great. It all started with the NWSL. I don't think they get enough credit for being the first team to go out there and to do it properly. MLS were the second ones, and I have to look. And I'm going to stand. I was wrong about this. I thought it was a mistake. I did say that, however, that even though I thought it was a mistake to hold the tournament in the beginning, I did say that in a bubble environment it could work, and perhaps there's nowhere safer than a bubble environment, and that happened. Zero positive cases since the first couple of, not even the first couple of days, but the week that everybody arrived, with FC Dallas having to be bounced from the tournament. And what was the other team? Why am I forgetting? The Whitecaps.
Nashville.
No, Nashville, not the Whitecaps. The Whitecaps were bounced by bad play. Nashville, as well. I checked in with one of their players to see if everything was okay, and everything was fine. But we've seen what is happening with Major League Baseball. Right? Does MLS want to make the same mistake? And there are no fans.
Hey, the numbers are going down. No, at least in Florida, the numbers are going down.
Yes,
so.
right. That's right. It went from 10,000 a couple of weeks ago to 4,500. Those numbers are still higher than anywhere in Europe by I think Europe in the hundreds or thousands. Like 1,000 to 2,000 in the entire continent. And here we're talking about one state in this situation. And we're also seeing that in a lot of places in the United States, people refuse to wear masks, right? So I'm not even going to go into detail about that. Just wear a damn mask, okay? Look, I understand the desire to play the game. I get it. But considering putting fans in the stands is ridiculous to me. It's absolutely ridiculous, and I would even say that it is negligence on the part of the ownership. Now, if it is in a city where there are no cases or very few cases, okay, fine. But that simply is not the case in most places in the United States, in most of the markets, MLS markets. So, look, it could work out for the best, and I hope it does, because we want to see MLS. We want to see fans in the stands. But I think that MLS right now is playing with fire.
I don't know if I agree with all of that, but I mean, there's definitely an argument to be made for what you said. Again, I think the financial aspect is a big part of this. Obviously, MLS isn't like other leagues where they get huge amounts of cash from their TV rights deal, so they're a lot more reliant on the game day experience and fans being in attendance and buying merchandise, buying tickets, buying food, drinks. So, I mean, we've seen it at USL. It's happened in USL games where there's some fans in some stadiums. I think it's gone forward pretty decently. I don't recall or remember many negative reports about those experiences so far. Could be wrong.
Well, has anybody even looked into it?
That's what I'm saying. I could be wrong.
Right. So, but I'll say this. I'll say this. If somebody's looked at those people who've been in those stadiums, okay, and they come back and they say, basically nobody got corona, right? Then I will come back on this podcast and say, you know what, guys, I was completely wrong. Get everybody in the stands. I won't say that part, but I will say that I was wrong. And if it's done carefully, implemented carefully, then so be it, and do it. But I want to see the data. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
I didn't have much else to add to that. I mean, it's going to happen. They're going to go forward with this plan. Some teams are doing it. Some teams are already going to do it from phase 1. Some teams might have to wait a little bit, but the wheels are in motion for teams to start bringing fans back. It might be too early for some people. It might not. But, that's the reality of the situation right now.
And on that note, let's go to the segment where we answer your questions.
All right, guys, it's question and answer time, our weekly Q&A session. I'm going to read the questions. We have a few for this week's pod, and Eric and I will take turns, as always, answering them. The first one comes from Carlos J. Flores at Midway 152 with the potential signing of Blaise Matuidi. How do you see the signing? True target or grasping for a name? What do we do about goal scoring? If Matuidi is a DP, who could we be looking to sign as a TAM and what position on the field? So I'll take this one because there's a lot there. Eric, I think we touched on most of that. I think I'll highlight the part where he asks true target or grasping for a name. I think given that they've had struggles signing a big name impact player in the attack, I think that raised their desire to sign maybe a bigger name in the midfield spot, maybe a more veteran player, as opposed to going with like an Agustin Almendra, which they had been in talks with before. And I think they're going to still try to sign either a winger or a striker. Again, like I said earlier, I think it's going to be a tough challenge for Paul McDonough to get done at this point in the year. But who knows? The Beckham appeal maybe can help him in that regard. The next question comes from JR Reed 11 at JRRC171. Is it possible to pay down Pellegrini's contract to free up another DP spot? Any word on Almendra coming on loan? What formation do you expect in Miami to play with Matuidi? Okay, so Eric, you touched on the center midfield spot, but I'll let you answer the first part because it is known that obviously Pellegrini's contract can be bought down and he can be seen as a 10 player, which would open up a DP spot. Well, I guess I just answered it for you. So,
yeah, well, that's what TAM is there for, right? TAM is one of those mechanisms in MLS that allows you to basically buy part of that DP contract so that it opens up a slot. And that slot, if my understanding is correct, has to be used on a DP player, right? So you can only buy into that contract if you are bringing in a DP player, and that is good news. That is good news because it would mean that perhaps Inter Miami have an opportunity here to go after a goal scorer. But as you have noted many times on this podcast, that is a big roster, Franco.
Yeah, they'd have to make a move for somebody to come off of it, whether it's via loan, whether it's via trade, whether it's you waive somebody would have to come off the squad. I think they're at 29 without Matuidi. I think they'll be at 30 with Matuidi once that gets done, if that gets done. So that'll be the interesting part of another interesting part of it. So that I do think, look, honestly, and I'm gonna say this. I don't think I got to say it earlier. With the losses piling up, obviously the pandemic shutdown happening and affecting their bottom line, I think that has raised their interest or their desire in signing a bigger name player. Because prior to this summer, with Cavani and William being linked, and now Matuidi being linked, it was all talk about, we'll sign a big name if it all fits, if the boxes are all checked off. But, if we might go the Atlanta route and just go with a younger player. That was more their thinking. And then the pandemic shutdown happened, and I guess maybe because the bottom line took such a hit and the losses piled up and interest started to fade, they were like, look, if we don't invest in some bigger name players, we might really crap the bed here. So we need to invest a little more here for the long-term success of this club. So we'll go to the last one here. It's not so much a question as it is a comment. It's from our another show regular, Andres. He's changed his Twitter handle. It's at ColoBlanco97. I'm probably too late, but Matuidi is a solid Swiss Army knife in midfield, but a striker would be appreciated. But this might help our current strikers with chances. We'll see. Eric, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think calling him a Swiss Army knife is pretty accurate. He can do a lot of things. Look, there's no doubt, and I want this to be something that the people who listen to this podcast, all three of them, I want them to remember. This is I think that Matuidi coming to Inter Miami is great news for the club. I just think that it's not going to be all roses. I think they're going to have to figure out, and then we're going to have to figure out if it works, but they're going to have to figure out, what system is going to suit this guy best. How is he going to influence this team and make it improve? And I think that if you bring a guy with all of his experience, with his skill set, then you need to play him in the position where he's going to give you his best, where you are going to highlight his best attributes. And that, for me, means that Alonso is going to have to switch his system. And I really hope it works, because I think that after this really tough start for Inter Miami, I think Inter Miami supporters deserve, something good to come out of this. They deserve some wins. They deserve some happiness, especially after having to put up with this pandemic that ruined everything for everyone.
Yeah, I'll just add that I guess we can put the bow on it with this, because this is kind of how we started the show. In my analysis of the games up to this point, I've talked a lot about the center midfield spots. Because, yes, Inter Miami needs a striker, and they need someone to score goals and to be more clinical, lethal, proven player that's capable of putting the ball in the back of the net in bunches. But in these 5 games, it's not like these strikers have had a plethora of chances and they've just botched them. The ball is not getting to them. And part of the reason for that is the play of the central midfielders. That's why I said on the last pod that I thought central midfielder had become as important of a need to be addressed as the striker spot. Because you could put someone else up there. You could put a DP striker, and you know what? He might make a half chance into a goal here and there. But if the ball's not getting to him, he's only going to do so much with limited touches. So This Matuidi news will, if it gets finalized, it will address a massive need for Inter Miami, in my opinion. They still have, obviously, another one to fill.
And with that, and Franco's perfect use of the word plethora, we've come to the end of this pod. And I want to remind everybody that you can follow the pod on all of the social media platforms that are out there except for TikTok, although I have a feeling that Franco has one where he showcases his best dance moves.
Nope.
No? Oh my goodness.
I was tempted after I saw Andy Polo put out his goal celebration where he did a little dance for his daughter, which was hilarious and made the rounds in the United States and Peru. But no, I refuse to have TikTok. It has nothing to do with any of the reasons that you've seen in the news. I'm just getting old, man. Like, as much as I hate to admit it, I am getting older, and the social media gauge, you can kind of tell when you're getting older, because you're like, yeah, I don't want to. That's for the kids. I don't want to be on that. That's not for me. So
we're becoming our parents. And the last note is that please review the pod. The more you review, the more people will notice the pod, and I think that everybody who is a soccer fan in Miami needs to listen to that. And with that, we bid you adieu. Until next time, big soccer heads.